springtime. The sun's shining. The trees have all of a sudden just gone into life. Gorgeous fluffy white clouds in the sky. Bird song in the trees. Life in the body. An open and expansive psyche. Do you know where I'm coming from, people? You know, the vast majority of people are myopic in their consciousness. They are contained into this human fiction of separation, of you and everything else, when that is all Maya. And it doesn't seem to matter how many people will speak of this Maya, how much is written about it, unless you actually have some sort of experience which shows you that this is Maya, you will never comprehend it, you'll never grasp it. So this morning I was sitting in my churchyard on my little deck chair reading this Jungian book on the archetypes and collective unconscious, and he's speaking of such things, the prevalence of the ignorance and the greatest of difficulty in the vast majority of people becoming self-realized, realizing the powers of the psyche and how it is the psyche which is the be-all and the end, and how the masses are automated and they don't know why they're doing anything. How many people really know why they are performing these societal rituals? Like we have the Christmas and the Easter and the Halloween and the Shrove Tuesday and all these little sort of societal rituals that nobody knows why they're doing them. And some people would have some sort of a vague illusion of why they're doing what they do, i.e., let's say Christmas time because it's the birth of Christ. Well, I mean, originally it's not. That's just an overlay. That's just a fabrication on top of a fabrication on top of a fabrication. You know, all this stuff, all of these rituals that we do, people, are all pagan in their origin. And they all revolve around the natural aspect of what it is to be in this physical form. But what the psyche has done has elaborate on the physical attributes and transfer anything that pertains to the physical into the metaphysical, into the mythological, into the spiritual. Now, many of these things were done unconsciously because it's just something that had a natural manifestation. If we are going to be describing what we do, then how better to describe what we're doing via meaningful illustrations that grasp the imagination. You see, because if you just speak about certain rituals being performed because the sun and the moon is in a certain sky and the earth is on a certain axis and all these sort of things, well, I mean, it's kind of like, it's very cold and it doesn't touch us, it doesn't connect with our spirit. You see, because we're spirited beings, we need something to connect with that. And this is why we create stories about these so-called physical things that are manifesting. And so, if we just look at a few instances and ask ourselves, what do we really know about these things? Some people put so much energy, they have so much faith and belief in stories that they will live and die for them. And so, just to mention a few, and some of you will, be able to regularly accept this, and without being, too destructive and demeaning to those who can't, there's a massive difference in the levels of our consciousness. Those who think that Allah, Muhammad, and Jesus and Jehovah and Yahweh and all these are real entities and they're out there somewhere and they're watching us and all this, it's bizarre beyond comprehension how the human being is so desperate to get away from the physical reality, so desperate to get back into their pagan and spiritual realms that they will project their pagan and spiritualism back onto the world and make manifest something else which derives out of it. And so if we ask ourselves, have we ever seen Jesus? Have we ever seen God? Have we ever seen Elohims? Have we ever seen angels and demons in the physical reality? No, we haven't. So, where do these creatures reside then? In the psyche. They reside in the psyche. And yet, what do? We project them back out onto the physical. They don't come from the physical. They don't pertain to the physical. They are purely metaphysical. They're psychical. They are figments of our imagination. And that's where they should stay forever and ever. And yet, how many people, through their own aggrandizement or self-empowerment, they want to project them back out onto the world as if they're real things and we should be afraid of them because they're there somewhere, they're hiding behind clouds and I don't know, all this sort of stuff. It's all mind, people. It's all mind. Every single thing we do is all mind. And so we just have to have the greatest of connection to that and realization. And when we finally accept that everything is all mind, and there is, in actual fact, nothing physical. I mean, just looking around here now, some of you go, well, look, I don't know what you mean by that, Aaron, because there's trees there, and they're physical. If you go and touch them, you can feel them, this and the other. But, I've been through all this, and many people have been through this. All this sort of stuff is just electricity, isn't it? They're wave electromagnetic fields. And there is no substance to them at all, but there is an interpretation of substance via our illusory physical bodies. And so, when we touch things, we feel a certain solidity depending on their molecular structure, their energy field. Some things feel more firmer than others. We could say that the clouds, they're real, there's something up in the sky, but then when we're up in the sky, we're looking, well, where are the clouds? Just think that maybe just a little bit foggy. And so it's kind of like, well, then all of a sudden it just gets like, well, it's not really, a cloud as such as an entity. It's just kind of like a bit of a mist in the sky, isn't it? And then when we look at all these different sorts of things, they're just different degrees of firmness and softness. And we can put a hand in water, but we can't put a hand through a tree. And, we consider them all equally real in our psychical projection. And so, that's as far as it goes. They're equally real in our psychical projections. But when people give their lives and an enormous amount of their energy into these psychical projections, it really is ignorance to the highest degree. And yet, the vast majority of people these days would call our pagan ancestors Neanderthals, and ignorant and stupid spirit worshippers. And yet, we're doing no different today. Every single thing that we've got going is all just a projection of our psyche. And even when we look at like, well, I want security and I want to be happy, and you know, I can achieve this by doing this, that and the other in this physical reality. And then, you know, when you've got some things, let's say you've got your house, you've got your car, you've got decent money in the bank, and you will reflect for a minute that, well, you've gained your security, and that came out of the physical reality. But where does that security come from? It comes from your imagination, doesn't it? If you feel that you are secure with your bricks and mortar around you and some paper in a bank, then that's your creation. That's your own fantasy. That's your own God. That's your own spiritual development, isn't it? That's all you've done. You've took an idea from the abstract and you've treated it as if it's real, and then you have complied with certain fictions of this reality, and you find yourself in a position that you've got your job and you've got your security, and you know, you've got your partner who you trust and this and the other. But how quickly can that all fall away? And how quickly can we realize that you in actual fact never had anything? You only ever had the illusion. You had the illusion of a partner that you could trust. You had an illusion of the security of the bricks and mortar. Because all that needs to happen is the bankers, they tweak the dial up or down, and then that enables you to have or not have whatever trinkets they are offering. And how many times in our lives have we seen them tweak the dial of the economy? And so they turn it down low, and then they promote that we can go out and get all these things. It's never been a better time to buy bricks and mortar, you know. And then you all go and do it. Everybody rushes out to do it, and then within 10 years they'll turn it up again, so things become more and more expensive. And what happens? Well, the bankers then reap all the proceeds. It's just like you know, one of these board games where the croupier wins all the time. And so people think at one point in their life that they've got security and they have love, and you know, they've got strength and they've got vitality and this and the other, and yet they'll go to the doctor and then they'll be diagnosed with something, and then all of a sudden they don't have no strength or no vitality. Their prospects of life are absolutely, you know, diminishing by the day. And so it's all Maya, people. It's all fiction, and we'll create our own fiction in whatever guises we want to. And if lots of you are watching my videos and you are wondering or a bit disconcerted or, you know, fed up with me speaking about religion and spirituality, well, that's all that is here. Because religion pertains to the imagination and fiction and spirit, and all this different stuff that we consider to be corporeal pertains to the same, just imagination. And so, you know, it's all just a dream, isn't it? It's all just a dream, a projection of our particular fantasy, of our particular menu of a life's culinary desires. What we consider to be a good meal, maybe, you know, your steady job and your income and your security, and you're thinking that, you know, you're all going to be safe and you're going to be secure for your pension. But how many times have the bankers just gone, ooh, sorry, but all that money's gone. No, all that money you paid into these pensions, unfortunately, is gone. We're sorry. And then you go, oh fuck, yeah, all the money's gone. You thought it was there, but then you realise it wasn't. Because the croupiers have just conjured up another line of bullshit, and they've rigged it all in, haven't they? when I was younger, I used to travel around lots of countries because I thought I wanted to buy a boat, and I took a course so I could pilot a 60-foot boat, whether it was a sailboat or whether it was a powerboat. I had this license, and this license allowed me to pilot my boat on inland waters and out on the ocean. So I did that, and then I scouted around looking for this particular boat, and I wanted one of these boats called a Turkish gullet, and they are a very wide boat, a lot of room on top, and although they have a mast and somewhat of a sail, mostly it's just aesthetics, just to look good, but they're a diesel engine operative, and they are for fair weather. Because they have a very shallow, round like hull. They don't have a keel for stability or anything like that. So they're just like a pleasure boat, a fun boat. And you'll see these all around Turkey and, Greece and places like that. And so I thought, well, I'd buy one of those, and I was looking at spending about £60,000 on one to get a 60-footer, because it worked out at the time it was £1,000 a foot. And I decided against it in the end because of how I am, that I don't like any level of containment, and whenever I've invested in anything, whether it's property or land, I've always felt constrained by it, a ball and chain. It's kind of like, you're at the mercy of the economic climate as to when you're going to sell it, and then you're at the fickle nature as to who you're going to sell it to, and I just didn't want to be involved in that. I've been involved in it too many times with property around the world, and so I thought, well, fuck it, if I want to go out on a boat, then I'll just hire one, and that's what I did. I used to hire one for a few weeks on end, and just travel around and doing all that different sort of stuff. But when I was doing that, I would end up in like first world European countries as well as third world countries, because I wanted to see how they both worked. And when I was in the first world developed countries, i.e. when I was in France and Spain, particularly Spain, because the British, for some stupid reason, I don't know whether it's that much these days, but most certainly, started in maybe the late 70s, 80s, 90s. People who had a few quid thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to own a yacht and to have it down in Spain under the sun, and they can go out onto the ocean and be free whenever they want to. But invariably, these people never took a certification in sailing, so they didn't know how to sail. They didn't know the ways of the waters, and they were terrified of going out into the open ocean in case anything should happen to the boat and they'd be left there bobbing up and down. And so all they did was they went down whenever they had a holiday, and they sat on their boat in the marina drinking their cinzanos, cling with some ice and lemon, and they sat on the back of this boat, and all the holes were gathering algae because they'd never actually been out into the ocean. And so these marinas were full of these deluded fools who had invested in this lifestyle, in this imagination, in this fantasy of being out on the ocean waves and having freedom. And yet it just turned out that they'd never really given it too much thought, and it turned out that they were too scared, in actual fact, to take that freedom that they envisioned they would have. Because first and foremost, they didn't want to put in the effort to learn how to sail a boat, to learn how to be a marine mechanic so you could mend the engine if anything went wrong. And then you'd need to take a course in meteorology and in tidal vectors and all these different sorts of things, to be able to navigate. So I did all that. It was very interesting and I loved it. But due to the containment, being on one boat, I thought, well, that's all very well and good, but I'm so interchangeable. And one, month I want beach, and the next month I want mountains, and the next month I want tropical rainforests, and all this sort of things. And so I thought, well, I can't really envision myself living for the rest of my life, bobbing up and down on this fucking boat. And so I decided against it. But we can see from that illustration how many people have bought into a fantasy, and it never ever even had the potential of being a reality due to the sort of people that, you know, do this. Now, in my estimation, all these people, when I used to travel around, I travelled around every single marina of the length and breadth of the French and Spanish coast. Trust me, people, you know, I was on a mission and I wanted to see prices and, you know, learn about all that sort of stuff. And so the vast majority of these people were retirement age, and of course they were infirm, they were mostly ill, fat, out of shape, and if they ever fell into the water, then they were surely drowned. So having this boat, of course, was a terrifying thing, because being on that boat, you know, it was all right whilst the boat was afloat. And if you ever got into bad weather and the boat tipped over or something, then they knew that most of they'd be dead. And even if they had a life jacket, you know, they wouldn't survive too long in the water. They'd be afraid of sharks or fucking whatever, you know. And so therefore, they only dared just sit on the back of it in the marina, having a chat with the neighbours next door. Oh, cheers! Or we're yacht owners, and we've bought into freedom, and yet, you know, very, very seldom would any of them ever take the boat out. And I watched them time and time again. A few boats would go out of the marina, and they'd go half a mile out into the ocean, and maybe they'd lay anchor. But you know, whilst the sun was still well up in the sky, they'd make sure they were back in the safety of the marina. And it was just a fucking joke. And the point is, they pay an enormous amount for this dream, because boats are exceedingly expensive for what they are, and to keep them in the marina, and the maintenance is highly expensive also. Whenever you go to any of these changlers, which is a place where you buy boat bits from, well, everything is just like you're buying a part for a Rolls Royce. You ask yourself, oh, do I have a fucking Rolls Royce outside, or do I just have a fucking boat? You know? And that's it. And it doesn't matter how old your boat is, all the bits are like, you know, as if you're buying for a Rolls Royce. It's just stupid. It's a stupid fraternity. And of course, business people capitalised on the fucking fools that were buying into that illusion. So it's all an illusion, it's all dream, it's all fantasy, people. That's what I'm saying. And it doesn't matter what facet of this life you look into, it is all fantasy. But as fantastical as it is, like Einstein says, you know, it's kind of like, it's stubbornly so. It's very illusory, but it's very stubbornly illusory. And, you know, as much as, you know, I can, you know, convey how this is all Maya, just like the ancient Hindus did and all the rest of it, there is a certain reality, you know, and this is the paradox of life. And we grow seemingly from nothing into, you know, fully fledged adults, and then, you know, we start to taper off and end up childlike again, needing our nappies changed and feeding and all the rest of it. Very peculiar life is, but generally the curvature of life is like a bell curve, you know, goes up and it peaks a little bit and it comes back down, and it's symmetrical in its shape. But I don't believe it should necessarily be that way. And we can look around and we can say, well, for some people it isn't like that. And so what I am endeavouring to do in my life is, I've gone up the same as everybody else did on the beginning side of the bell curve, but I'm endeavouring to have it taper off much more slowly. And so it doesn't go up and then come down like a bell. It goes up and then it comes down like that. How do we do that? Well, we do it via maintaining health, obviously. Because the healthier we are, then you would think if you if you relied on logic and reason, then the healthier you are, the longer you'd live. But of course, that isn't necessarily the case, because we can see very unhealthy people and they just don't fucking die. And I'm all speaking about, you know, my neighbour or neighbours, you know, old fucking people, very infirm and ill, and yet they won't fucking vacate this place. And I just gotta wonder what sort of spirit they possess, because it doesn't want to let go. It seems to have come to this dimension to experience something, and it doesn't matter, you know, how mundane it is. For instance, if you know, old people, they are housebound and bedbound, and you know, they can't walk or do anything, and yet they just keep waking up every day, waking up, waking up, waking up, waking up. It is like a living hell, isn't it? When you're infirm and when you're bored and when you're sick to death of the same old miserable faces all around you, and the carers and this, that and the other, surely you'd just be praying to the cosmos, just fucking allow this body to die. But for lots of people it doesn't. And you know, the general consensus these days is, you know, to keep them alive. Yeah, keep them alive longer and longer and longer. And you can't help thinking that, you know, it's evil intentions, because by keeping them alive, then it's just like, you know, like keeping sedentary animals alive. It's good money, people. In the UK, for you know, an average sort of care home, it's $5 grand a month. And what do they have to do for that? They've got to feed them, they've got to fucking change the fucking nappies now and again, and you know, bed sheets, and buy a fucking telly and stick it in the corner, and that's it. Oh, good God. And so it's big business. And so to keep these, probably lots of them low maintenance, you know, just changing the fucking nappies is no more than you would do for a child. A child would shit probably 3-4 times a day, whereas an adult probably only shits once. And so yeah, that's how it is. And I just wonder, you know, these people, I've yet to learn or hear about an old person writing a book about getting closer to death. If any of you are familiar with this, and you know a decent book, I'll be all ears, because I think it's a subject that just isn't written about. Because when people are getting older and the point of death, it's like the last thing that they think about. We've got some innate shut-off mechanism within our consciousness, which doesn't allow us to concentrate on the death imminence. And even when I speak to the old fucks around my place, if I ever broach that subject, they're just like, well, think about it. You just fucking get on with it, don't you? And it's kind of like, you never think about it. I mean, if you're fucking 80 years old, you never think about it. Well, there's something seriously wrong with that, but then is it, you know, evolutionary right? Is it absolutely evolutionary correct that they never think about it? Because if they did think about it, then one of two things could happen. They could get up in the morning thinking, oh fucking hell, I wonder if it's going to be today, I wonder if I'm going to die today, am I going to die in the bath, am I going to die on the toilet, am I going to die in bed, am I going to die undignified, with shit in my pants, and so all my family going to know I got shit in my pants when I die. And or people might go, fucking hell, it might be today that I die, what am I going to do? You know, let me be kind, let me, I don't know, fucking try and make a difference in the world or something. But these old people don't do fucking nothing. And this is why the world in its current disposition is making manoeuvres to prevent that from happening, because the world cannot cater for you know, a very high percentage of old people that need their nappies fucking changing, that are no purpose whatsoever. They are obsolete machines. They came here, they did their bit to society, and now they're just a burden and a drain. And to be fair, they just have to go. And I would think that most offspring, when they've got aging parents, just wish that they would just fucking silently pass. Because personally, you know, in recent times I've experienced people having to just to waste their lives on a non-life, you know, showing up every day, a couple of 3 times a day, doing this and doing that with no thanks or response, and you know, throwing their life away due to some sort of moral obligation, some sort of guilt. Oh well, it's my mum, or it's my dad, and all this sort of stuff. You know, close to me at this moment in time, an old person is ruining everyone's fucking life in the vicinity. And I'm like, fucking hell, universe, just take this bitch. Take this bitch. She's fucking not compass mentis. She's angry. She's fucking just horrible. And just a burden on everybody else, and a drain on resources and all the rest of it. You know, Aldous Huxley in A Brave New World, you know, in that world there were no old people. And there were no marriages and no dumb fuck institutions like that which imprison people in sadness and guilt, you know, for ever and a day. It was just free love, and people were all young, and you know, there was no forced labour, and there'd be no childbirth. All the creation of the human race was done through technology. And the society en masse rose the children with no particular preference to any one, no love and devotion, just like these human beings, you know, we're just a bit like, you know, some form of communism. Communism, people, a community, and this is very much like it is in lots of tribes in Africa. The community raised the children, and you see the African people mostly, you know, being very sexually promiscuous because that's their nature. They're not into this monogamy stuff. They didn't know who the father was. Could have been, you know, any one of the tribe members, and so therefore all the women would raise all the children, and they'd all breastfeed whatever children, because you wouldn't know whose father it is, and it wouldn't matter. Just a member of the community, you know. And so Aldous Huxley, you know, I think he took a few lessons from, you know, indigenous peoples, and looked at our societies and thought to himself, well, these societies are not generating happiness. You know, I guess it was an overlord's societal intention to bring some sort of standardisation, an idyllic way of living with your partner and your 2.4 children and your picketed fence and all that. But all that stuff is vacuous. It's not serving the human being, because we need to have our spirit catered for. We need to have our collective unconscious catered for. We need to have the mythical facet of what we are catered for. Because all this is just one facet of it. You know, it's the Darwinian evolutionary facet of it, but there's another facet of what's going on here, and it's vastly over and above all this so-called illusion of physical. You know, it's a metaphysical world, people. So how many of you think of the metaphysical, or how many of you are just bought into this live, eat, shit and die sort of thing? Realm. How many of you are seeking for something else? I've posed a question, you know, who are you? Who do you want to be? Do you know what the fuck you are? Have you ever considered, you know, the spiritual facets of what it is to be a human being? But it's not conducive to modern societies, because you'd end up being an outsider and you wouldn't get along, because society doesn't reward people like that, because they're considered to be dropout woo-woo, you know, fools at the end of the day, when, you know, it's the obverse. And so it's all very, very bizarre. But if you want to learn more about this sort of stuff, then just learn about different cultures, more ancient cultures, and see how they lived. And you'll see a whole different facet of what it is to be a human being. It isn't just about slaving, working, fucking nest egging and all that sort of thing. It's about actual experience. Spiritual experience, people.